third part of building a game from scratch in Flutter. So I obviously have to turn off the sound over here, otherwise I'll hear the echo of everything I'll say. So here I'm tweeting this on Twitter. So my TH Lawrence is my Twitter handle. I'm just going to post it into the. Actually, I'm going to tweet this tweet, and like, if you want to just like make sure that your friends also find out about this, you can just retweet this one. Trying to get a lot of people on board here, especially if anyone has questions. I want to be able to answer them now. So the more people are on, the more questions we'll have, which will be great. But regardless, I'll post this on YouTube as well after we're done today. Okay, so what did we do so far? So we built a tile map in the first instance. And so this is a tile map that we're working with right here. Then we converted part of the tile map, basically just the player, which happens to be number 4, into a game model. So we have the game model here, which has a player. And so the player will tell us what its position is at the current moment. Obviously, when the game is actually working, that position will keep changing as the player is moving. And then we basically took that model, we rendered it, right? So the paint is kind of the game rendering. The player actually moving and all these things will be part of the update, right? So usually there are 2 parts of to the game loop. Okay. Also, we added this little grid just to help us out. So, and as I said, right now we will focus on actually drawing a player here, like a nice little player. So what we'll do is we create, first of all, we create a folder here, package, and we'll call it, actually we have to make sure to create it out here actually. So it's actually directory, and we call it assets. Okay. And inside the assets, we have a directory called images because we might have, sounds as well and so on. All right. So for now, we will not. So yeah. So the player we consider a sprite. Okay. So let's do that. Sprite. Okay. So now we have these nested folders here, and as I said, we already did this before. So obviously, I already have a player. And I'll just copy that over here. Magically it appears, and we'll call it so it's called UFO now. I'll rename it to player. Oops, what happened here? I don't know what that means. I pressed a shortcut and tells you did something. I think it might have added it. Nope, I don't know what that means, the little thing. But anyway, so he's a player. As I mentioned when I showed the game that we're building, this might seem very familiar. It's basically from a tutorial for Unity. All I did is I added a little gun here. It used to be just this round thing, and since we want to kind of have rotation going on, we want to know where we are pointing, I added this little gun, and obviously we want to shoot as well. So now we have our sprite. So now the question is, how do we go ahead and render it? So first of all, we have to add it to our assets. So how do you add things to your assets? So I'm going to look this up to make no mistake. So basically, what you do is you add an assets thing here, right? And then you say what assets you want to load. So we have assets, images, and then it was sprites, right? And then it was player.png. So now we got that asset will now be included with our app and running it, right? For that, obviously, we have to actually restart the app, but we will do that when we're actually in that at that stage. For now, what we're going to do is we're going to understand how sprites actually work. How can we actually render this image that we looked at? How can we actually render that instead of that boring little circle there? So, if you go back to our. If you go back to our canvas here, so the canvas, but we actually should probably rename this. So we should probably put all this in a method, and we say draw player for now, right? Okay. So now we have the player, and instead of rendering the circle, what we're actually going to do is we're going to say canvas dot draw an image. There you go. Right? So we can also draw an image rect, different ways to do this. Okay? And what we'll actually do is we'll still keep drawing that circle for now to make sure that we actually render the player correctly. Okay, but the problem is we don't have an image yet. And that's basically where we'll probably right now go into Flame, and we'll steal a little bit ideas there. So how do they actually do this, right? So what we're actually doing is we're implementing something that's called a sprite. So you can create a sprite from image here. So what does it mean? So you have to pass in an image. Okay. All right. So where does the image come from? Okay, an image is actually part of the Dodge engine, right? You can see here that Flutter is actually using the Sky engine to render stuff, and it has a notion of an image. So how do we get an image? Well, let's look a little bit through here, how they load images in Flare. So here we got the images. You can see that I am fairly familiar with this. And basically what we're going to do is we're almost going to steal this as is. So I kind of like the whole idea of caching. And yes, it seems bad to just not use a library, but again, I have reasons why certain things I just don't, they just don't work for us. And there are, this is a different discussion, there are advantages and disadvantages of having, of using existing game engines versus your own. If you're trying to do something very specific, very special, well, the thing is that you always have more flexibility if it's your own game engine. Always. There's just no question about it. More flexibility. But obviously, it's also more work. To do your own, you have to do your own bug fixes and so on. But the other reason why here we don't want to use the engine is because we're trying to do this from scratch. And cheating a little bit here to speed things up. But I'm trying while we're doing this to basically walk through all these steps to understand what this all is doing. So at least we understand everything that's happening. Like there's nothing in our game that we don't know how it's working. There's no magic at the very least. So okay. So first of all, we have to look at it's using Flame here for one little thing, and that's called FlameBundle.load. What is that? So let's go back there. I kind of jumped around. Flame bundle load. And that's part of the asset bundle. All right. And that's actually part of Flutter. Okay, interesting. So Flame has something called an asset bundle, which is the root bundle by default. What's a root bundle? Here we have in a root bundle, that's all part of Flutter. So this is actually the first time I'm looking at it like this. So here we allow it to overwrite the bundle. And in our game, we don't need that. So again, this is like where we can be a lot simpler than a game framework has to be, because the game framework has to be very flexible and consider all use cases where we only have our own use case. Okay, so let's look at what this is. So we have an asset bundle, which is the root. And so again, where is it coming? I'm not sure, like, where is the root bundle actually coming from? It's down here. So it seems to be some sort of, if I'm not mistaken, it seems to be some sort of global. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I don't want to just copy and paste this actually. So I'm going to make this as small as possible, and I'm actually going to move this to the other screen. And we're going to implement this piece by piece, and I'll talk us through this. So part of the engine, we'll have images. So the reason why I also want to have images is because I like the idea of caching them and preloading them. So when your game starts, you can kind of preload all the images, and then you have them. So, but we won't focus on the caching yet. So what we first focus on, there's this function here that says we get an image as a future, and we'll fetch from memory. So what does it mean, fetch from memory? Well, it means most likely that somehow this image is already somewhere, as it was bundled with the app, right? So now we have the choice of what we want to import, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to explicitly show where everything comes from, so we understand this better. So this comes from .ui. It could also come from other places, but this is the one we're looking at. Okay, part of Flutter. So now what we do. So basically we saw that the bundle was basically just the root bundle, right? Root bundle. Let's see how we can get access to that. Okay, there it is. The root bundle is part of services. Okay, and so that one has a load method. Okay, and so we, apparently there are different ones. So this is for byte data. An image is byte data, so that seems like the nice thing to do. So here it has basically name, right? And if we look over one part that I also didn't like, there was some magic about where you have to store your images, right? So basically, we had to give it just the name, and then your image had to be in this subfolder, right? But the thing is that we're already specifying here exactly where this is, so it makes sense to just basically copy it, right? Just copy each line of this into your code, and then you're sure, and just give it the full path, so there's no magic anywhere. So what we're actually going to do, we're not going to have string name, we're going to have a string like, I don't know, path, right? And then we load that, but then what does it return? It returns us something. Let's see. It returns us a future of byte data. So final byte data. Let me actually jump back to put that over here. So we get the byte data, just the data we call it, equals, but the things we have to await it, right? Because it is well, not that, but the load function gives us a future, right? Okay, so now we got the data. And now it comes to interesting. So basically, we convert that to bytes. And again, I'm not an expert. This is what we kind of steal a little bit, but let's try to understand as much as we can what's going on here. So the data has a buffer. Okay. So basically, okay. So let's see what this is. So uint list 8 is basically just a list of things, right? And it is expected to contain uint 8 things. So it's a buffer with basically like 8 bytes stuff in there. So that's pretty much all we have to understand. Right, so if you say, so let's see, so the buffer is supposed to be, so you can see the buffer is uint8 list. So we are here now in the buffer, so buffers implement that. I would like to see what actually uint8 is defined as, but it doesn't really say it. So basically it implements list of int, right? So that means that uint8 is just represented like as a list of integers. So basically what we're getting here is we're converting the data that's in that image. We're kind of pulling the data out of the buffer, and we're converting it to basically uint8s, like a list of uint8s. And so you can see the view thing, it allows us also to get only part of it, right? So we could say, hey, we actually want only half of it, and we give it the length. But obviously what we do want is we want the entire buffer, right? We want the entire image. And so now comes the interesting part. So basically what we do is we want to decode an image from that. So now we have raw bytes, right? And we want to convert that back into an image. So what we do is we say decode image from list, and we give it the bytes, right? However, if we look close enough, so first of all we have to import something more. So add it there. right? So you can see it's all part of .ui. And now if we go in there, though, it tells us, hey, this is actually going to happen off thread. So, so basically, instead of blocking the UI thread while this is happening, you can see that it's actually calling this function, which is that. It's doing it async, which returns a future when it's done. And you can also pass it a callback. But basically, we don't want to run this on the same thread naturally. So what we're going to do is we're going to do something that's called a completer. So we create a completer, and the completer will basically complete with an image. So we create a new completer, and actually let's do this differently. I like to now where we have the freedom to rewrite the code. So this is part of .async, right? And if you have any questions about this, you can easily look this up if you search for Dart completer. Completer class. There's more information here. I'm gonna paste that link into the chat. But if you have any questions, feel free to. I have the chat open over here. If you're not getting the chat, I don't know what you can do. You can't reach me. I hope you are, because I mean, maybe someone could just type something to the chat, just hello, so I know that my chat is actually connected to the stream. I'll wait a little bit for that. Okay. If you're so inclined and want to like send me a little message just so I know my chat works, that'd be nice. Okay, so basically now we code the bytes, and so when we get back the image, this is like the callback that we're implementing here. Then we say completer.complete, and we complete with the image. So this is kind of how we convert, because decode from this doesn't give us back this the image. It basically wants to call us back, right? With this callback, which takes the image as a result, right? And so what we want to do instead, we kind of want to make it it's kind of like we're converting it into, like, you know, if we come from JavaScript to like a promise, we're converting it into a future. And so we return completer dot future. So basically we're giving it a future of an image. So no one mentioned anything in the chat. Maybe everyone is just on their phones or something. But what I'll do is I close the chat now, and I'll say hello. So like it seems like we had some internet issues here, but now we're back. So that must just tweet about that. So I think I was out for a few seconds, just when I was asking for someone to post something to make sure my chat works, and so then I was wondering why no one did. So I'm posting this dot completer thing again. So whoever came back, sorry for the so it still shows here as unstable. I'm not sure why in the US I'm having these issues, but I apparently do. Okay, but we were in the middle of, I'm just going to keep going and hope that everything will be fine. I can see over here that I am streaming, that things are coming out, so let's just hope for the best. Okay, so we just basically explained how we basically fetching a root bundle. We're fetching basically an asset from a specific path, and the root bundle is basically so it says like instead of using it directly, obtain the asset bundle for the current build context, but we don't have a build context, so that's perfectly fine. But basically this is where so basically once we put something here in the assets, that's where we can find them, right? If you don't put them there, we could load a file directly, but it's much better to load it as an asset. Okay, so I see like some people of you are coming back again. Sorry for the internet issues. We're back here. If you have any questions, if you missed anything, let me know and I'll repeat it, because I don't know how much actually we missed. And also, if you just want to send me a message to say hi or something, just to make sure my chat actually works, that'd be nice. Okay, so we figured out how we can actually fetch the image from. So basically, we have bytes, and then we actually convert it to an image. So we get an image back. So now, if I want to load an image, it's actually now very simple. Not simple to say apparently, but simple to do. So we just load the image and give it a path, and that's also a sync, obviously. And so right now we're not caching it, and so basically the only reason why this exists is for caching. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a map here. Loaded files. Actually, it's images, right? Loaded. I'm just making a map like that, string, and it's image. All right. So now, if loaded dot has or contains, then we just return it, right? Well, the thing is, so we have the path, right? If we don't have it, then we need to load it. So basically, what we're going to do is load it. So we're going to say the image. We're going to await fetch from memory from the path, right? And now so now we have the image, and now we basically just need to say loaded dot set. Is there something like set or add? Or we can just do this path image. All right, and so then we return loaded. And you might think, okay, well, it's async. How do you know you already have it, right? Well, the thing is that we're waiting here. So even though other things in the app can keep going, it doesn't jump to the next lines until this await has finished, right? Until basically our completer completed. So that's how we get an image. Okay, so that's great. And what we also want to have is we want to maybe be able to preload certain images. Right, and so basically what we want to do is we want to give it a list of string, of file names, of paths, so to speak, and then we just loop through all of them. But basically we're using a future, and basically what we're doing here is and we load them all. And this is a little bit complex to see, but so I'm going to explain this a little bit. So we need async for that, apparently. Let's see. Actually, we may not need that. It's complaining though, so let's see what's going on here. Why is it complaining? Let's call this loads. Loaders. Okay, so basically what's happening here, if you add the type annotation, right, it's basically just a normal of future. So basically we converted the path to actually these futures, right, because we called load on all of the paths, and so now we have the future of image, and we have multiple of them. So that means we have now a list or a little, right? Okay, and so now we need to say future weight. Why is it complaining about future weight? I'm not entirely sure. Put the loaders in there. Let's see, why is it complaining? A value future list image cannot be returned. Well, yeah, that's because we have multiple, right? We have multiple of those. Okay. The thing is that actually it's more like an enumerable, because so if I assign this, right, and I add the, okay, and then let's just put this back to be a list. But if I add the type annotation here, it says it's a list. So I guess future weight returns a list automatically. Yeah. So it's not really an enumerable. It's actually really a list. So list, that's inline, that's variable. Okay. So now we kind of preload all, which means that if we load it, they will all get put in the cache, and by the time you actually come here, they're already all in the cache. Okay. So what we do now, in here, we can go and preload all our images. So we say, so we may have to make our main async, and then we'll say images dot load all, and so images we need to import, and then we give it a list of images. And as I said, I'll just basically copy and paste. To not make a mistake, I'll just copy and paste from here. Right, easy. And then there's no magic, and so basically here we're saying assign value to new local variable. Okay. So why does it want to do that? Because I don't really care about the result, right? I want to basically ignore it. But what I do have to do is I have to await it. And I'm still not sure why it's complaining now. It cannot be as using static. Okay, good. So basically, we have to create an instant. We have to. This has to be a singleton, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say static images instance equals images. Okay, and then we create a getter. We cannot override them ever. We can never set it to something else because we want a singleton, right? Otherwise the cache doesn't work. So the question is, why is it complaining about now? What? I'm not sure what the problem here is. Okay. No, but this is not a const. So it's images. The only thing that I don't understand is, oh, obviously we need to give it a name. All right. So I should actually be happy. It's not happy. Maybe the getter. I'm always confused with the order of things. Also, since I'm doing TypeScript a lot, and then they keep changing. Like they're different. They're slightly different. These languages are very close, but just different enough, and it confuses everyone. At least me. Okay, now we have a way to get the instance. Now we go back to main. Instance. Okay, now it should be happy. Okay, so we could also do fire and forget. So what we already could do is we could already start our game, and then if you happen to load an image that hasn't been loaded yet, it would be fine. But let's just like start like this. So now we're loading the images, right? Okay. Now what we actually want to do, we want to actually wrap, we want to create like something like an image sprite, which we can easily render, which we give a name, and we can render it. So let's look back at our Flame project here. The Flame, so we got this, right? So if we look through some of these things that they have a sprite, right? So in the sprite, you give it a file name, right? So, and you can see that it automatically does all the loading for us and all the fun stuff. So we don't have for each little image that we want to put into our game, we have to implement it all by hand. So I'm going to move that over here because we're going to now implement a sprite. Okay. So Dart sprite. Okay. Okay. So so obviously what we're going to have, we have an image which will never change. And so for now, that's pretty much all. But the other thing that we need is we need for the user to give us a file name. Right. So what we do is we give it, and it's not the file name; it's actually the path, right? And then optionally we have other things, but that's fine. So in the I'm just reading, the image cannot be final because it will be created as part of the thing. So basically what we do here now is we say image. Okay, so here's interesting. We cannot make this constructor await anything, right? But we know that if we do images or load, so if we want to get our image, right? Well, we have to instance. Right. So here we get our images, right? So now if we want to insert, then we say load, and we want to do the path, right? Now that doesn't return an image really. So if we put the type here, for instance, we realize that we actually have a future of an image, right? Now what we could do is we could say we just want to await here, and we make the constructor async. But that doesn't really work. You can't have an async constructor, okay? So actually, we could do some, use then and all these things here. But you know what? I actually think that if we just implement a static method that allows you to create a sprite from an image, that makes a lot more sense. So what we'll do is you can't invoke this ever. Like we make this constructor private. This is like a weird Dartism to say, no one can call this because underscore methods are automatically private. And then actually the cool thing is that we don't even need the freaking path because we can just make the image final, right? So basically what we're doing now is we're saying image, you need to give me the image, and that's pretty much all we care about, right? For now. So then this constructor becomes stupidly simple, and then we have a static message, and we call it from image. And so basically this will give you a future of a sprite, right? And then it will load from image, load. We call it load sprite. Like actually did it in the framework as well. So then we give it a path, and then we make this. Now we can say, okay, just make it async. Fine. Now we can actually await the image. Okay, and then we return a sprite from the image. Okay. So except that we need to use a private constructor. Okay. Okay. So problem. So this is async. So basically, when we want to get a sprite, everything will always be async, which is annoying. So let's look through the code how maybe they solve this here. So basically, what I'm worried about is that then everywhere in our code where we want to use that sprite, right, we have to await, and that doesn't really work really well with the game loop. The game loop is synchronous, so you don't want to really await anything in there, ideally. And I see here the way they did this is they basically said, okay, well, we can kind of put it then here instead. And so basically you're executing the constructor, and technically you still have an incomplete thing, right? You don't have a real complete sprite yet because the image hasn't been loaded when you actually get the sprite back. And so let's see when you actually go ahead and render it. So when you render it, if it's not loaded, it just doesn't do anything, and that's probably fine. Because what's going to happen is that when when you're in the game loop, right? So you basically, your game loop executes, and then you render the first time, and the sprite is not there, it doesn't paint anything. Okay, fine. Then you come around again, and you try to render again, and you keep doing that, and at some point the sprite will be there. And I actually think that makes a lot of sense. So what we'll do, so you can see everywhere it checks if it's loaded yet, and so the loaded basically checks if the image is there. And the funny thing is that the source gets always assigned with the image, so this double check here is not really necessary. And I actually honestly think that doing it this way is not like the best. We should probably just mark a property loaded when we know we loaded it somehow, and that way it looks much cleaner. So what we'll do instead, so this one is one way to do this, and we can actually probably use this function, but let me think about this. The question is there a reason why it's now private? And I don't think there's a reason. So I mean, we leave this method here. I think we'll probably kill it at some point. We probably don't need it, but let's leave it there for now. So first of all, the image will no longer be final, because it will be actually derived. So basically, like we're undoing everything we just did in a way, because I reconsidered that somewhere we'd have to wait, and I don't like that. So we got the path. The image now cannot be final. And so basically then the image, so what we do is instead of waiting, we use the other way of dealing with async. We're using .then. Okay. Now obviously we should do a catch here as well, but let's not worry about this at the moment. Okay. So now we got the method. So first of all, we're going to put a boolean here, and we say loaded, and then we implement a getter for this. All right. Okay. So when we're done with all this, we say it's true. It's loaded. Okay. And initially it's false. Right. Well, actually, what we do, we just do this as a constructor. It's much cleaner. So when you construct a sprite, it is considered not loaded. Right. And then what we'll do is we'll assign the image to the image. Okay, now what they added here as well is they allow you to override the width and height of the sprite, which might be useful, right? For now, what we'll do is we'll actually we have a width, and we don't allow overriding it yet. Okay, so then basically what you do is we derive the width from the image. Okay, and now I'm confused why it's complaining. Okay, it's int. So it's to double then. And we keep them as double because, as I said, we will maybe allow overriding this at some point. So you got width and height. And so then it's loaded, right? And so now, as I said, we're getting rid of this. And so the thing is that original size, we don't need this. All right. So they have a bunch of methods in here that we probably don't need yet. So what we want to do, we want to render it, right? So that's what we want to do. So void render. Okay. And obviously we need a canvas. Right. The thing is though, we could also say instead of saying render, you'll say give me the image. I render it myself. But the thing is then we'll repeat that code everywhere. So we probably don't want to do that. So what we want to do is we want to give it some way to know where to render. And the thing is that for our intents and purposes, we'll render everything centered, right? So there is a render centered method here, and we'll just make that our default, right? So the Flame engine, just show this, has multiple renders, but again, we're just only building the engine for our game, right? So we don't need to consider all kind of possibilities. So basically, what it gives it is gives it a position. Well, and that's the part there where I started to not like it too much, because the position is part of Flame. So now everywhere in your game, you are tied to Flame just because they want the position as a position. However, the position is just basically the same thing as an offset. So we can just at least instead take an offset, even though it's a position. So an offset could be anything, right? An offset can be, if it wants to be a position, it can be the offset from here to here. That's an offset, right? That's technically a position. It can also be an offset from here to here. So an offset you can pretty much use for everything, and it actually makes sense. And if you look at some of the offset methods, you have some distance things and so on. So basically, for positions, in our you can add them, whatever. For positions and offsets, we'll use offset. For speed and so on, for velocity, we'll use a vector, which we'll get to later. So first of all, well, if it's not loaded, we want to return, right? And the only reason, there's really no reason why we make this available, actually, right? So let's move it. Like we'll keep this engine as simplest way possible for now. So there's really no reason why anyone has to know it's loaded yet. Once we have that reason, we can add that property, right? We're not building a framework. We're just building an engine just for ourselves, right? So we can simplify a lot of things. So then the thing is like the size, right? So how do we get a size? Well, the size must be derived obviously from X and Y. And I'm going to show you. I'm looking at like how they did this. So basically they calculate width and height, and then they create some sort of rectangle XY. So that's the source. And basically they just use that in order then to, and I'm actually very not entirely confused, but I'm not like a huge fan of how this works. So when you render centered, right? You're not even using the source, right? You're just using or basically here if the size is not defined, they're using this size, and then the size is just the source of width, but we already have width and height, so we don't even need this source thing, right? And then the position, it's also a position, but we don't even need a size, so to speak. We just need width and height, right? So we don't need to encode it into a size and then pull it back apart. So what we'll do instead, so if it's not loaded, we return. And then we say we render direct at canvas, right? And so now this is confusing because where is it actually rendering? Our image. Where is it actually using image? So this is confusing. Okay. So now I'm officially confused. The rendering, oh, it's because they're calling that here. Okay. Okay. So the rendering is a function that they actually call. Oh, fine. So yeah, they do that with the source and all this stuff. So I don't even want to do that. What we'll do, we'll just tell canvas to render an image rect, right? Draw image rect, right? Draw image rect. If we ever need more functions that are similar, we can then pull that code out. But basically, what do? We need to give it the image. Okay, that's easy enough. And then it wants a rect. So once the rect. And let's try to understand what it actually means here. The source and dist. it draws a subset of the given image described by source into the canvas in the axis-aligned rectangle given by the dist. Okay, so basically what it means is like here we're defining what part of the image we want to actually draw, right? So we could, so if we look at our image here, right, we could just want to draw maybe this part here, like this rect, or maybe just the center. In our case, we pretty much always want to draw the entire rect, right? So again, for our engine, we don't consider that yet. And then the dest is basically where do you want to draw it, and that's basically the part that we need to be given, right? Someone needs to tell us, and that's part of the position. And so we define that by whatever the position is, and we do it centered, and by whatever the width and height of our images, right? So, so the source is basically exactly, so it's a rect left and y, which is basically 0, 0, right? And then it's basically the width and height of our image, right? So you can see here it's basically constructing inform its left and top edges, its width and its height, okay? And then, so then the position will be, we call it center because we draw everything centered in this game. So basically the destination is basically our source, right? Except we want to move it to wherever we want to draw it to. So basically it's our center.dx and center.dy. So basically, right? So basically what you're saying is, okay, draw the same player, right? But move it to wherever I want it. So basically, right, we're defining our image like basically like this, right? Assuming 0, 0, like we're just defining a rect, right? And then we're saying, where do we want to draw it actually? Well, it's the same rect, except we have to move it to wherever in the canvas it has to be, right? So let's do that. So we translate that, and this is because we never want to have part of the image rendered. Once we have that, that will probably still work anyways, but we have to be a little careful. There might be some issues. And let's just look at the way that Flame does it. So basically they say, oh, they render it centered here. So that's interesting. But the thing is, so they center it for you, right? But the thing is that we are already giving it the center. So you don't need that step. Right? So what we're gonna do is source dist, right? And then Flame also has a way of overriding the paint, which we don't need. Right? Might be interesting for debugging, but we'll get there. So why is it complaining now? Once image or rect, okay. For positional, okay. So, oh well, okay. So it has a paint. Okay, so that's interesting, right? We're learning as we go. It's kind of cool to work through something like that. So we got the paint here, and the paint is a basic palette white paint. I'm not sure why that's needed. And so where does the basic palette come from? Where does the basic palette come from? It's not there. That is interesting. So let's see where, let's define. So for now, we'll just copy that. We don't really need a whole palette, I think. So we'll just put that here. If we ever need it in other places, obviously we will. Oh, there's no such thing. Okay, so a palette entry is still something. What is that? Oh, it's okay. Okay, so basically it's a paint. Right. So what was it called? It was called paint. Fine. Paint, and then we say colors white. Okay, so now we got that paint, and it needs to be const. Let's see if that works. Doesn't want to be const. It's not a const constructor. Alright, and make it private. Alright, and so now we can give it a paint. I don't exactly know why it wants a paint, because it's already drawing the image. So what's wrong with the image now? So the image here, we get an image. It's also complaining there. Ah, here we have the problem, right? So the image that, yeah, this I ran into this earlier. So the image that draw image rec takes comes from painting Dart, right? And so where are we in the framework? Trying to figure out where this is coming from. So part of .ui. Okay, fine. So we need to make sure that our image also comes. So we have to show, and we have to add the image because we want that to come from there. And the thing is, I think materials also has an image. So why I don't want it to show that. I just want it to show colors. So that's like where it gets a little bit confusing. And now we basically are happy, right? Because so there were two kind of images defined in Dart and Flutter. One is coming from the .ui, and one's coming from material. Okay, so now we got the paint. So now basically what we should be able to do is to render our image at the right point. So this is like the big moment we've been waiting for. So instead of, when we draw the player, right, so we have the center, and so instead of, so for now we're just going to create a sprite, and we give it the we hard code all this. We just want to we want to see this working. That's all. We will later on we will fix this. But for now, we just want to see if we can see a sprite. So get that. Right. So we give it the image path. So we get a sprite, right? Okay, and then it might not work because we're only rendering once, right? And it might not load in time. So it's complaining. Oh yeah, two offset, right? Okay, let's see if that worked. All right, so yeah, this is a funny thing though. Service binding default, and that's when I mentioned I had this one thing in my code which I didn't understand exactly why it needed to be there, but apparently it did. And I'm just going to copy it in. We need to initialize the Flutter bindings. All right, and it's synchronous method. And I'm not sure why. I think that will fix it, hopefully. Okay, now we got another unable to load asset, blah, blah, blah. Maybe because we have to actually restart it. So let's restart. Because once you add an asset, you actually have to restart the app. Because we're almost out of time. So I hope this will work. If this doesn't work, if I can't get this to work in like 5 minutes, I'm going to have to take the break anyways and see what happens. So load, okay. Still we have unable to load assets, image, sprite, player, PNG. It's right there. Assets, images, sprites, player, PNG. And okay, so now we have to figure out why this is not working. Oh, see, look at that. Maybe no, I'm not sure. Not happy about that. Maybe there's another way to get an image. There's to try something here. Well, there is in Flutter. But I don't want to necessarily go there because I want to keep this working. We haven't even tried yet if this is working in the browser, which we'll do once we get this part. So we are adding it here. Then we're loading it here. Assets, images, sprites, player. See. So it looks fine to me. Oh, I finally got rid of that. It was a bookmark on a file. Okay, I didn't know you could do that actually. Okay, but anyways, so okay, I think we need to consult the web. Flutter root bundle load asset. So the root bundle. So here we have our assets. Okay, fine. Do we maybe need to put the Flutter on top? Let me double check over here. Okay, so yeah, assets needs to be under Flutter, and that's what I'm missing. Just a little white space. Let's see if that works now. So assets needs to be grouped under the Flutter property. So let's see now if we can load it. I hope it does. Otherwise we have to finish without a player, at least not with, still with a circle that we had. All right, so it loaded happily. It just didn't render anything. Okay. Okay, let's see. Why doesn't it render it? Oh, if not loaded, return, right? Haha. So basically, I think what's happening here is that, as I said before, right, the sprite is getting, yep. Okay. So what we actually need to do here is, in order to make this easier on us, we need to have another constructor that allows us, that takes in the image directly, and that we can basically that we can basically directly await. So we create a factory constructor. So basically what we do here is, let's put it here, let me change this. Okay, so basically what we'll do is extract that something like that. So from image, right? And so what we'll do is we move this down. This would be a convenience method, and then what we'll do here is, can this be async? Okay, so we can't do async method. That's a factory method. But it's fine. We can just do this. Now it's async, and so well, actually we still wanted the other one too. So let's copy this. Let's undo. All right, and then here we're basically doing this, but we await it actually, right? And then learn from path, and we need let's do from path string. All right, then we load it. Then we have our image, right? And so then we do sprite from image. Get image, all right. Image, we call it, all right. So what's it complaining about here? Okay, it's future. Okay, good. And then we can basically just say it's called image again equals image, and then we'll size from image. All right, and so and then obviously loaded. Let's move this to where it's actually happening. It's confusing otherwise. So load is true. So by the time we get this back, loaded will be true. And so now we can have another thing where we can basically say we actually create the sprite all the way up here already. We say player sprite is sprite and from path, and we await it. All right, so now we got our player sprite, and then all we need to do is pass it all the way down, which is annoying, but this is just for now, and we clean this up later. Okay, so and then we have a final sprite, player sprite, and so this is the player sprite. I'm running against time here. I want to actually almost finish on top of the hour, but we're not going to be able to. And then I'm going to do this as well here, and as this is required, so all these actually required to make sure. All right, and then okay. All right, so now we create this. Let's make this nicer. All right, so now we get the player sprite, and so now we should be able to do player sprite. Nope, player sprite, but render. All right. So the thing is, like, at this point we have a. Don't need. Oh, well, let's leave it now. Let's see now what happens. We still see no sprite. Why not? Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. That's very big. So we got a player sprite, as we can see. All right. So we got a player sprite rendered, and this is where I make a pause. Please stick around. I'll just take a 5-minute break. Let's just say at 15. Whatever is the hour, X hour 15, so roughly 7 minutes, I'll be back with the next part. And in the next part, obviously, we will size our player correctly. And then we'll start just implementing a simple